Good morning, it's Hazel Jarvis. Today we are going to go down the garden path and we're going to gather some fungi and we're going to paint them. And these are the fruit of this morning's walk. Look at that gorgeous big one. So to start with, I suggest you just grab some printer paper, a nice soft pencil, and start drawing very loosely some fungi shapes. So I start with the cap and then I put in the stem. Or here I start with the stem and then I fit in the cap. And you have to remember that all the gills have to radiate from this center spot. So here are your cutout fungi and you're going to move them around to make your wreath. I like to start with a big one at about the sort of the 5 o'clock mark, and then I'm going to take another one and put it at about maybe 10:30, something like that. And then we'll have another big one at about 2. So it starts to look like this. We'll bring in a second round shape to echo this, and we'll put it just up here. And maybe we'll have a third round shape here so that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 looking good. Now we're going to go in with some smaller shapes. And you can have them with the caps pointing out or with the caps pointing in, like so. And then we'll put in just a couple of small fill-ins like this. Okay, we're probably going to need a couple more small fill-ins, but this is going to be the basic pattern or the basic template for my wreath. So looking at my template, I'm going to draw roughly this same composition, thinking about 3 and 3 and thinking about having something large in the 5 o'clock position. I keep my basic design very simple and very pale because it's easy to add, but it's nicer to keep it simple to start with. I try to do as little erasing as possible because it damages the surface of the paper, but where the stem crosses the edge, I'm just going to take that out. On a little bit of scrap paper, you can do your color swatches. So I like yellow ochre, I like this mossy green, number 54. Of course I like lavender, it's my most useful color. That's 61. Maybe burnt sienna, 46. Whoops, that's a little dirty. And maybe the Van Dyke brown, 47. Black, 20. If you want to have some brighter color, you can always mix in some yellow, 43. Nice cadmium yellow, or you can put in some orange or some pink. It's totally up to you. So the underside of this guy is sort of a pale fawn color. So I'm going to make that by mixing my lavender 61 and my burnt sienna 46 and maybe a touch of yellow ochre going in. So I wet all over. And then I start to float the color in. And I want it darker at the edges to suggest that the rim is casting a shadow. This wonderful specimen right here. And it's exactly the same process. You wet the underside where the gills are. You touch in a tiny bit of color and you let the water do its magic. Now we'll do the caps on the smaller mushrooms, and it's the same thing. You're just going to wet it very lightly, and then we're going to bleed in a little bit of color. I'm going to make this a bit brighter. So I'm going to use some orangey red 31. And I put the color around the edge here. And then I'm just going to take my clean brush and stroke in. If I want to go darker, I can just put a little bit of neat color into one corner. I put it on the tip of my brush and just touch it in. And you can see how the action of the water and the paint perfectly mimics the surface texture on the top of the cap of a mushroom or of a fungus. And these little guys here, we're just going to wet. I'm going to take a tiny bit of the Van Dyke brown and just touch it in. To do the top, I repeat the process. I put in the water. By now it's tinted a little bit, but that's actually kind of nice. So I brush in a light layer of water on the top. And I leave about a couple of millimeters between the wet underneath and the water at the top. I go all the way around so it goes behind the stalk, using a number 4 brush with a nice point. And then I dip in and I get a little bit of stronger color and I just touch it in and let the water flow. And a little bit darker behind the stem. And if the color runs as it is here, I don't mind it at all, but I like this progression of dark, light, dark again. If the caps are dry, you can paint in the stems. I'm going to add another little one just over here. Now you can see a little bit of the pencil showing through, which I quite like, but if you don't like the pencil, you can just erase it before you paint the stem. Before painting the gills, which are the spokes on the bicycle wheel, we have to wait and let everything dry, so take a quick break. So for the gills, I want a fine line and a fine brush. I load up with paint, the lavender and the brown, and on scrap paper, I do a series of strokes just to knock the excess paint off. And when I get a fine line, I'm good to go. I start at the base, and I want, as I said, all the gills to radiate out from that center at the base of the stem. And I press down so that some of them are fatter, and then I lift up with the brush so that they get thinner as they go in toward the center. You can do all the gills, or you can do as I've done and just suggest some of them. It's totally up to you. For a mushroom with spores, it's just a series of little dots. So I could leave my wreath like this, which is nice and simple, or I could do a little bit more. I think I might put in just a couple more of these tiny little ones over here, and maybe a berry or two. Now have a beautiful fungi wreath, and I hope you'll have fun painting these, forgive the pun, and just explore the magic of watercolor when you do so. And I can't wait to see what you do.